Eli Bueller. I was the one who technically started this project for a trivia type of board.
I'm Sean Elke. I was the lead designer on this project.
Down here, we already have the board set up. The brain pieces are there, the target squares, action cards are on the action space, trivia cards are back here. They're a bit hard to see from your guys' angle.
We just gave a general overview of the way that the game was played. So essentially, you had two sides of the board. The game would have you split evenly into two separate teams, and it works just like any other trivia game would. You drew a trivia card, and then you attempted to answer that card. However, there were a few differences. Number one, the opposing team chose a moderator that was the one that read the question to you, and you as a team had to decide. The person that was youngest would go first in answering questions, and the moderator would then ask them that question. The youngest player who was answering the question at the time would then be the only one allowed to verbally answer that question. Anybody else on the team could try to help, however, they couldn't give them any hints verbally. They had to try to tell them in charades-like style or draw it out, anything that they could do to help, but not also try to not give too much to the other team. Because if that person got the question wrong, then that question would go into an alternate card pile. When the round then passed over to the opposing team's turn, that team could choose to either draw a new question or draw the previous question and answer it themselves. And that also gives that team an advantage because they have the moderator for that round. The moderator cannot be the one answering the question, but they will know what the answer is due to the fact that the answer is on the card, and they will be able to have an advantage in giving them hints for that card. Essentially, when one team got a point, their brain would move one square forward. After a 2-square gap, the rope would mean that the brains would end up moving with each other as one team continued to score points. This meant that there was a fair balance in the way that teams scored each other's points. Another mechanic that was added was an action card system. So when a team managed to get the alternate card correctly, that team would then be able to draw an action card that has very, very specific abilities, like being able to gain a hint or steal a primary question that somebody draws from a new pile. This means that if you have a team answer the alternate question correctly, that team then gains an advantage. The idea of this was to have extremely complex questions so that when a team got something wrong, you would have the potential for a comeback mechanic if one team was overall dominating on brand new questions every single time, as tends to happen with a lot of trivia games. Unfortunately, I've seen one of the core design flaws with this being that the questions that we ended up having were just too simple and too easy to charade out. I believe an improvement for this game would having more complex questions be the actual trivia. Once one team got to the end of their side of the board, then that team would win. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, just to give a closer look at some of the cards. The answers upside down, on the bottom, upside down in small text. Questions there. Otherwise, it's basically just as he explained it. And also just to mention this right now, just because we're the only 2 team members here doesn't mean the other members didn't want to show up. It more likely means they couldn't.
One team member had class, and then the other team member was simply busy. However, they both did input equal amounts of service to the best of their ability towards this project. There were several different ways that this design could have turned out. This ended up being the finished product. However, this was not the way that we had originally planned it. While I had written out the rule sets for several different kinds of play styles, including a casual and competitive team style, Eli had come up with the original idea of having 6 brains on the board, and the brains representing players, having a max of team of 6 players for the game. When the brains continued to move with each other, if they were connected, for example, you would have one team that, when they started to win, would have a brain reach the end and then move out of the game. The idea of this was that if there was a team member that was overall dominating for everybody else, that they would not be able to continue to carry that team towards victory, and it would have to rely on the rest of the team for at least a couple of questions in order to gain victory.
Additionally, the change were going to be additional pieces connecting all members, up to 3 members on each team, and it would be a square-for-square pool rather than a 2-square pool that we do have now.
Eventually, it was decided that this would just simply be too complex to try to orchestrate. As you can see, our chains are still barely working the way they are now. So trying to orchestrate a chain between all 6 things and have it work flowingly, and also write a new rule set towards that, as I didn't initially realize that that was the design plan, would be simply too troubling. And so we ended up revising it to the original game set that we ended up with.
Hello, this is Eli Buechler, just adding a little bit more to the video at the end, just kind of showing off the Discord, showing everything that was done, how it was done. Just scrolling through general, I'm not going to really explain anything, just gives you a good idea of what happened. You'll see different like concept art, different videos. A lot of things will not make sense as I just scroll through this because you'd have to bounce around between all the different pages to see the different orders. The announcement page, we didn't use that too much. Question page was never used. Design page, used quite a bit, mainly for just rules, so not as much images filling up the space documents. Art had a lot of stuff. Sorry, we've been designing things. I don't know why I said I'm explaining things, but now I'm not. Or I am now. Fun times. Trivia idea is always a good one. Weirdly not where the trivia idea document ended up, but it's over here in documents, which makes equally as much sense. And of course, it's just a general voice channel. But that is it.